Hello, this is Brian Rowe from Mythic MTG Tech, looking at the M13 rules changes. One thing I also want to point out here is that I did recently pass the Rules Advisor quiz, and I'm not pointing this out really as a credential, more as a bit of a warning to take what I say here with a grain of salt. I will definitely look for a strong post done by a judge, and if I make any mistakes on these, please point them out into the comments. I was a judge way back before M10, and I recently spent a bunch of time on the rules in order to get better at competitive Magic because the rules have changed so much. So let's jump into these rules changes. First big one deals with keywords, and there's two different keywords that they point out specifically in these rules. One of them is unblockable, and the other one is indestructible. I may have misstated that slightly. Both of those are terms in Magic. One of them, indestructible, has become a keyword. The other, unblockable, is not a keyword. Now, what does this exactly mean? Most people assume that both of these are keywords and always have been keywords, that they are abilities that creatures have, and that if you do things such as have creatures lose abilities, that these are lost. These are actually slightly different than abilities until this rules update. These were aspects of the creatures that stayed on the creatures regardless or not whether a creature loses all abilities. Now, indestructible has been promoted to the status of keyword, and that basically means that if the creature loses all abilities, this indestructible ability goes away too, where by comparison, unblockable does not leave the creature. It's an aspect of the creature. I'm not even sure that's the technical correct term here, but it will stick around on the creature. The main reason here for not making unblockable a keyword was explained that there are many different types of unblockable, and it didn't really work with the rules mechanics well to turn it into a keyword. With regards to Indestructible, this does have a few minor gameplay effects. It was previously that if you had played a card like Boros Charm that gave your creatures indestructible, and then you later played a creature, that creature would gain indestructible within that turn. Now the creature has to be in play to gain indestructible. The basic mechanics of how indestructible works, in that your creature does not go to the graveyard when it would be destroyed, is the same. And the aspect that if the toughness goes down to 0, your creature then still goes to the owner's graveyard is also still true. So the basics of how indestructible works is not changing, except for with regards to the lose all abilities type text. One of the big winners out of this is humility. Humility now affects creatures and removes indestructible from those creatures. The second rules change that I'm really in support of is regarding sideboards. So sideboards used to be 0 or 15 cards. Now they may be up to 15 cards. You can have a 0 card sideboard, which you could always have, but now you can have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or 5 card sideboard, or you can have this all the way up to a 15 card sideboard. This also affects how you sideboard. The new rules say that you can put in any number of cards
in from your sideboard,
but you may not take out more cards to drop down below whatever your original number was in
main deck.
So you can have a deck that is 60 cards, and you can put 10 cards in and only pull 1 card out. Now, thinking, why would somebody possibly want to do that? Let's say that I've got a deck and it has some extra land in the sideboard, maybe some utility lands, and we're in a control mirror match. Upping the percentage of land in my deck when I'm going up against a deck where I want to ensure that I hit the land drop every single time could be extremely advantageous. This is going to mean that strategically people need to rethink their sideboards, especially in environments where control matches are very common and hitting your land drop is extremely important. I like this new rule change. I like that it also adds some new strategy with regards to sideboards, and it's going to also result in less game losses where somebody accidentally puts in too many cards and forgets to pull cards out of their deck. The next rule is that they've changed the way that land drops work. Basically, the way that things are going to work now is that you have one land drop per turn like you've always had, and then if you have an effect that gives you another land drop, that adds to your total number. And cards like Explore and Oracle of Modiva are going to be treated differently. Explore gives you that additional land drop till the end of the turn. Oracle of Moldiva gives you that additional land drop as long as the Oracle is in play. And it ups basically the total number of land that you can put into play that turn. Previous to this, if you had an Oracle of Moldiva in play, you played a land and you played a second land, you return the Oracle of Moldiva to hand, and then you played it again, you could put an additional land into play. Now, what would happen is when you return that Oracle, your maximum number of lands would go down to 1 for that turn, back to your normal. You wouldn't have to return a land to play, but it just wouldn't allow you to play another land. By contrast, if you play an Explore and then you say snap back another Explore, because this is a this turn effect, it would allow you to play
a third land.
I'm not 100% sure why they made this rule change. It's a little bit unclear to me. I'd love to have somebody explain to me the exact reasoning. Part of what they put into the post was that under the old rules, you were supposed to specify whether this was your extra land or your normal land for the turn, and that this new way of doing things is supposed to alleviate some of that confusion. Honestly, it only applies to a very small number of edge cases, and I think that this new rule is going to cause just as much confusion as the old rule. The biggest rule change, though, is the rule change to the Legend rule and the Planeswalker rule, and essentially these changes are parallel between them. The old rule stated that if you had a Planeswalker or a Legend with the same name, that those cards could not exist at the same time on the playing field. And when the second Legend came into play, or the second Planeswalker with the single name came into play as a state-based effect, not using the stack, both of them would get sacrificed. Now, the way that the new rule works is that it only applies to the ones that are on your side of the field. The ones that you have in play. So now I'm allowed to have a Geist of St. Traft, and my opponent is allowed to have a Geist of St. Traft. Additionally, when the second Planeswalker or Legend comes into play on your side, you get to choose which one of those gets sacrificed. And this actually ups the power level of a significant number of cards. So you still cannot have two different Jaces on your side, but each player could have a Jace of the same name or different names. Each player can also have Legends of the same name on the playfield. So let's look at how this impacts actual cards. Things like Mox Opal definitely go up in power level. It was really bad playing Affinity to have 3 Mox Opals in hand. And it's still not that great, but you could at least play the first Mox Opal, tap it for mana, play the second Mox Opal now, get rid of the first Mox Opal, and then have that second Mox Opal available to
use.
Another card that gains some power is the second Jace played. Previously, if I played a Jace the Mind Sculptor and my opponent played a Jace the Mind Sculptor, I got to brainstorm off of mine, but his only acted as a removal. Now, if your intent was to remove my Jace the Mind Sculptor, then you would definitely lose that Dreadbore type ability. But if you actually want to gain card advantage and use the abilities on the Jace, then that second one has a lot more use to you. Caracas also gained some power as a sideboard card. A lot of show and tell decks were adding Caracas to their deck to legend rule out your opponent's Caracases directly. I have even used it in 12 post as a way to get rid of my opponent's Crocus before playing a legendary creature myself. So now as a defensive card, Crocus is a bit stronger. Another thing that was interesting and pointed out was that Dark Depths and Thespian Stage have a really interesting interaction now. Dark Depths comes into play with a bunch of counters on it, but Thespian Stage does not. It just turns into a copy. So you could put Dark Depths out, and then you could put out a Thespian Stage, become a copy of Dark Depths, get rid of the Dark Depths that has all of the counters on it, and then spend 3 mana, activate the Thespian Stage, and get your 2020 Indestructible token. It's a nice little trick for playing an EDH. I like it a lot. Another creature that has really gone up in power level, at least for the person who's using it aggressively, is Geist. One of the weaknesses for Geist was being legend ruled out by your opponent's Geist or a clone. I definitely used clones to eliminate my opponent's Geist when I was playing control decks and hated to see clones take out my own Geist. A Geist that is attacking in an aggressive deck is much more valuable than a Geist that is on defense. So the person putting that first Geist into play and attacking with it is going to gain more value out of their Geist. Liliana the Veil also goes up significantly in power level. One of the most annoying things about playing bug control with multiple Lilianas was once you put out the first one against an aggressive deck and you -2'd it, your opponent could basically ignore it and just attack you, knowing that it might be stopping another Liliana from coming into play and forcing them to sacrifice a creature. Now you can just put that second Liliana in play, get rid of the first one, and then use the ability on the second one. This also has a very interesting action for clones. In some cases, this is going to make clones much better. If I'm using a clone to copy something that I want the copy of, it's great. But if I'm using it offensively as a way to destroy legends, then the power level of clones go down. I think it's still a little bit to be decided which is the actual winner there, if clones get better or worse with this ruling, but there's aspects both ways. But I think the real big winner out of this is the casual commander player. Nothing is more annoying than to bring a commander deck somewhere and have one or two other people at the table playing that exact same commander, and then you have to find a different commander in your deck and kind of be pushed out of playing that deck in the casual format. This rule makes it a lot easier for commander players to each have the same commanders, and it makes that environment more friendly. I kind of wonder if one of the main reasons behind this was directed at improving commanders' players' experiences. The biggest winner, though, has got to be Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle, especially in an elf combo deck, is amazingly powerful, and one of the big disadvantages of having 4 in a deck was that your second one would would legend rule your first one out and you wouldn't be able to get mana from it. Now you're going to be able to get mana from both of them and even leave that second one in play. Gaia's Cradle has already went up 35% in the last 24 hours, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it keep climbing until it makes it over 150 or so, maybe even 160 in the coming days, because of how much power this card gains by not legend ruling itself out. One other thing to note is that these rules changes take effect July 13th for paper format, and with Magic Online, they take effect July 29th. Thanks. This has been Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech, looking at the M14 rules changes. If there's any mistakes that I made in here, please clarify them. I'd greatly appreciate help, especially with regards to rules. Thanks.